The Legacy Superhero Season 3, Episode 9, A Legacy Defended. 1 week later, I was awoken by my alarm clock, which was blaring in my ears. I slammed my fist down on the snooze button and tried to go back to sleep. But I hadn't slept very well last night, and now that I was awake, I couldn't go back to sleep. Resigned to my fate, I threw the blankets off me and sat up, rubbing my eyes and yawning as I looked around my dark room. According to the clock, it was about 8 in the morning, which was the usual time I got up during the summer, but I didn't feel well rested. Then again, I hadn't felt well rested this whole week. I now understood how Dad felt whenever he got home late but had to get up for work early the next morning. It made me wonder how he dealt with it, because I was pretty sure I couldn't run off of a lack of sleep like that. My eyes fell on the top drawer of my bedside desk. The Trickshot watch was in there, but I didn't care to look at it. Ever since getting it back from Techno, I hadn't worn the danged thing even once. Well, okay, I did wear it in order to escape from Techno's lab and get rid of the sedatives in my body, but as soon as I got back home, I put it in the top drawer of my desk and hadn't even looked at it. After TW's passing, even looking at it was too much for me. Yawning, I picked up my phone off the desk and started going through my news feed. I was hungry and wanted breakfast, but I was too depressed to get up and get something to eat. Besides, I didn't hear the sounds of Mom making breakfast, so I had probably missed it. My attention was drawn to the first headline at the top of my feed from the Rumsfeld Journal, which read, "Infamous supervillain Arthur Holz Renner sentenced to maximum security prison, government officials can confirm." Curious, I clicked the headline and began reading the article. Host, Texas Governor Alexander Jones has confirmed to the media that the infamous supervillain Arthur Holz Renner, formerly the superhero of Houston and infamous for his serial killings back in the early 2000s, has been upgraded to a maximum security prison just outside the city especially designed for supervillains, the Rumsfeld Journal can confirm. Holz, who was apprehended in Rumsfeld, Texas last week after kidnapping a local woman and threatening to kill her, has been placed in the highest security prison in the country. Governor Jones has stated that Holz is expected to remain behind bars for the rest of his life and that he is currently not a threat to anyone at the moment. Holz became a national news subject last week when he broke out of prison in Houston. He successfully evaded police and superheroes alike until he was apprehended in an abandoned warehouse in North Rumsfeld, thanks in no small part to the efforts of Rumsfeld citizen Walter McDonald, who shot Holz in the back with a gun, which paralyzed Holz long enough for the police to arrive and arrest him. Walter McDonald was recognized for his heroism by Rumsfeld Mayor Harry Adams 2 days later. Officials are still investigating how Holz broke out of prison in the first place, though current evidence suggests that Holz may have had outside help. That was where the article ended, but underneath the article, under the related articles and links section, was another headline that read, "James Techno Albert, former sidekick of Trickshot, has gone missing in his apartment." I didn't bother to click the link because I already knew what the article would say. It would probably say something about how no one heard from Techno in a while, and when someone went to check up on him, they discovered that his apartment was empty and no one knew where he was. They would never know the truth about Techno or what really happened to him. And I intended to keep it that way because right now I didn't think that people were ready for the truth. It wasn't like I had any proof that Techno had been obliterated by his own disintegration device, or that I could prove that he had been Holz's mysterious benefactor, though I imagined that Techno's many security cameras and hidden microphones would provide evidence clearing my name in case the police thought I had killed someone again. And anyway, I managed to find and retrieve the original Trickshot watch that Holz had bought for Techno. Right now it lay in a box underneath my bed, where it would stay until I could figure out what to do with it. I thought of outright destroying the watch, but for some reason I hesitated, maybe because it was such a unique device that I couldn't bear the thought of destroying it. It might be useful to have a backup watch anyway, though hopefully it was one I would never need to use. But given how both watches didn't have TW anymore, was there really much of a difference between them, aside from age? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't stand thinking about TW's sacrifice. It had affected me far more deeply than I would have originally thought, to the point where I wasn't sure I would continue my superhero career at all. It was funny. Back when I first met TW, he had kind of freaked me out because of his status as a sentient AI. It didn't help that he acted too much like grandfather to my liking. Yet I was now mourning him almost as much as I mourned Thomas's death, although not to the same degree, of course. Even so, it felt more like I'd lost a close friend than a sentient computer program. Kyle was back in Texas now, having come back home the day after TW's death. I had even told him about it, but I rejected his offer to look at the watch and try to fix TW, because I knew there was no way Kyle could do it. Kyle was a tech genius, but I figured that TW's AI was too advanced for even someone as technologically gifted as him to handle. Techno might have been a scumbag who was wrong about a lot of things, but I figured he was probably right about TW. Sighing, I almost decided to go back to bed and sleep in for the rest of the day, but then my stomach growled louder than normal, and I realized that I was too hungry to go back to sleep, even for just an extra 5 minutes. Rubbing my stomach, I swung my legs over the side of my bed and made my way downstairs without bothering to shower first, or even change out of my pajamas. It didn't really matter anyway because Mom and Dad didn't mind if I came down in my pajamas, and besides, I only wanted to get maybe a piece of toast and some milk. I wasn't expecting to have a full breakfast, especially because it seemed like Mom hadn't cooked it this morning. Reaching the kitchen, I found Mom and Dad sitting at the table. Dad was reading something on his tablet, probably the news, while Mom was sipping her coffee and reading something on her e-reader. The two of them, however, did look up at me when I entered. "Morning, Jack," said Dad as he lowered his tablet onto the table. "How are you holding up?" I shrugged as I walked over to the coffee maker and poured myself a cup of coffee. "About as well as ever, I guess. TW... "Ah," said Mom, "the hologram you told us about, right?" I nodded glumly. After TW's death, I told my parents everything about my identity as Trickshot, including TW. The two of them had been absolutely shocked to learn I had been keeping such a big secret from them for so long, but luckily, they were still accepting of me. I still expected Dad to take my watch away from me at some point, however, because I knew how Dad felt about superheroes, and I doubted he was going to let me continue to play the superhero for much longer, however accepting he might be right now. "I remember TW when I was your age," said Dad. "He was always with my dad whenever they were out on the town fighting supervillains and criminals. It's a shame I didn't get to see him again before he died. I bet we would have gotten along great." "Yeah," I said. I leaned against the kitchen counter and sipped my coffee cup. It was dark and fresh, which was exactly how I liked my coffee. All I know is that he's gone for good, and there's no bringing him back, at least from what I can tell. "Sorry to hear that, Jack," said Mom gently. "Losing a friend is very hard. When I was in 5th grade, my best friend died in a car crash. It took me a long time to get over it." "Yeah, I know," I said, nodding. I put a hand on my heart. "It's kind of like losing Thomas. Not exactly the same, but I feel pretty much exactly the same as I did back then. I'll handle it. I would have added, I think, but I didn't want to worry my parents more than I already had. My parents were very protective of me due to being their only son, and I didn't want to make them even more protective of me than they already were. "Take as much time to mourn as you need," said Mom. "Just like with Thomas, you can mourn as long as you want, and we'll support you every step of the way. Right, Walt?" Dad nodded, though he looked a little uncomfortable. Of course, You're our son, and we'll always be there for you, no matter what. You understand?" "Yeah," I said. "Thanks. I really appreciate it." "Of course," said Dad. He hesitated, but then said, "About being Trickshot. Have you been wearing the costume at all lately?" I shook my head. "No, not this week anyway. Too painful." "Right," said Dad. "I get that, but what about your grandfather?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You said you know where he is, right?" said Dad. He leaned forward slightly, a concerned look on his face. "Are you going to go get him at some point or not?" I tilted my head to the side. "You want me to go rescue Grandfather from Icon?" "If that's the group that's got him, sure," said Dad. "You're a superhero now, right? So you should be strong enough to take on those guys." I bit my lower lip. I hadn't even thought of Grandfather at all this week, primarily because I was too busy mourning TW, but I remembered that TW had downloaded the coordinates to Icon's island base into my phone, which meant that even without TW's help, I could still find Grandfather if I tried. "I suppose so, but I'm surprised you're even suggesting this at all. I thought you wouldn't want me to go fight a secret criminal organization by myself like that." "Don't get me wrong," said Dad, waving a finger at me. "I want what's best for you and don't want you to put your life in danger needlessly. On the other hand, however, I also want to see my dad again, and if you can save him, well, just know that your mom and I will support you no matter what you do." "But I haven't even mentioned rescuing him, though," I said. "But you want to save him, don't you?" said Dad. "I can tell. You have that look in your eyes." "I do want to save him, but—" I shrugged. "Without TW, I don't think I can do it." "You still have us," said Dad. He stood up, walked over to Mom, and put an arm around her shoulders. "We'll support you. We'll help you however we can. We're on your side 110%, just like we always are. I know you're mourning and all, but I also know you want to save your grandfather, and we want you to save him too. So we'll give you whatever you need in order to do that." I was about to say that I wasn't ready to assault Icon's base just yet, but then I paused and thought about it. Wouldn't TW want me to save Grandfather, rather than spend all this time mourning his loss? The two of us had talked about going to Icon's island base to save Grandfather ever since Uncle Josh gave us the base's coordinates, but we had never done it while TW was alive. Yet who said I could only do it with TW's help? Maybe I just needed to believe in myself and not get worried about being on my own. Looking up at Mom and Dad again, I nodded. You're right. TW may be gone, but I'm sure he would have wanted me to save Grandfather even if he wasn't there to help me. So I'm going to do it no matter what Icon throws at me. Dad smiled. "I'm proud of you, son. When do we start?" I smiled back. "Tomorrow. We'll need to make a lot of plans, but we're going to move fast. We're bringing the war to Icon whether they like it or not." Elsewhere, on Icon's secret island base in the Gulf of Mexico, it was unusual for Roland Chaser, the superior of Icon, to summon anyone into his personal chambers. It was even more unusual for Chaser to summon the woman who had used the alias Christina Madison while in Rumsfeld a few months back. Usually, whenever Chaser interacted with the rest of Icon, he conferred with the higher-level agents only, and even then he would be selective about which one of them he spoke to. Christina did not understand why Chaser was so secretive and selective of the company he kept, even in his own organization, but she had been with Icon long enough not to be bothered by it. She was actually more bothered by the fact that Chaser had summoned her, a lower-level agent, to his personal quarters, which was almost as rare as finding a four-leaf clover. She stood in front of the door to Chaser's chambers. It was a huge, thick metal door located on the deepest levels of the tower. Supposedly, it was designed to be strong enough to withstand a nuclear blast, but Christina, lacking a nuclear bomb to test that claim, could not verify it. She could only verify that the door was very big, very wide, and thicker than a boulder. She doubted that even that trickshot brat using his super strength would be able to knock it down. Shaking her head, Christina looked up at the single camera hovering above the door and said, "Superior Chaser, this is Christina Madison. I am here in response to your earlier summons." Christina spoke politely enough, but only because she knew what would happen if she was rude. Chaser didn't like rude agents, and Christina had plenty of reasons to be rude. She had been in the middle of taking a nap when she received the summons from Chaser, and she just hoped that whatever Chaser had summoned her for, that it was important. Of course it had to be important, because Chaser never summoned his agents for anything less. There was no verbal answer, but the door slowly opened inwards, revealing a pitch-black room that looked more like a cave than the personal quarters of the superior of Icon, but Christina dutifully stepped into the chamber. As soon as she entered, the door slammed shut behind her, making her jump at the loud sound. But then she stopped and looked around, trying but failing to see in the darkness. A huge computer screen flickered on before her. Its blue light was the only light in the room, a room Christina sensed was far larger than she could see. The only thing on the screen was the symbol of Icon, which was a single eye with a line crossed through it. "Superior Chaser," said Christina, bowing at the screen. "It is a pleasure to meet you." Of course, Christina knew that the screen wasn't Chaser. At least, she thought it wasn't. Truth was, most Icon agents didn't know much about Chaser, or even what he looked like. Supposedly, only Atticus Frederick, the second highest-ranked member in the organization, had ever seen Chaser, but Atticus kept whatever he knew of Chaser to himself. That was frustrating, but Christina didn't expect anything different from Atticus, who was in some ways even more secretive than Chaser himself. A monotone, robotic voice came from the screen. "Agent Madison, I am pleased to see that you answered my summons promptly. Your files state that you have a lazy streak, but perhaps that was an exaggeration from Atticus." Christina blushed. She was well aware that all Icon agents had extensive files on them that Chaser had access to. The files were nearly definitive guides to each individual Icon agent, detailing not just their names, ages, and birth dates, but also their personal histories, personality flaws and quirks, and habits, both good and bad. Christina never knew how Icon managed to compile such detailed files, but she supposed that Icon was just very good at digging for dirt from people's pasts. "Yes, I can be a bit lazy," said Christina, "but I know better than to ignore summons from you. After all, you expect nothing but the best from your agents." "If you think you will win me over with flattery, Agent, then you are quite delusional," said Chaser. "I did not summon you because I need my ego stroked. I have a specific task I need you to do, and you are the only one qualified to complete it." Christina cringed at Chaser's harshness. Though Christina was pretty sure that Chaser wasn't a soulless, merciless robot, he was very good at pretending to be one. "What do you need me to do? Not that I'm complaining or anything, but I'm just a low-level agent, not good for much." "I don't care where you stand in the organization's hierarchy," said Chaser. "There have been recent developments in the outside world that require we take action right away. Specifically, developments related to the Trickshot issue." Christina could not help but snort. "Are you talking about how he beat that sniper Atticus sent after him? I thought you had already sent someone to kill Damien before he could tell the police who hired him." Christina was careful not to place the blame for the failure of that particular mission on Chaser. Chaser did not take blame very well, and more than one agent had met a rather grisly end for blaming Chaser whenever something went wrong, even if they were correct. Christina would rather be alive than correct. "It is not the issue at hand," said Chaser. "The real issue is that Trickshot knows where Iconia is, and he is going to come very soon in order to rescue Gregory MacDonald, despite the message we sent to his friend Kyle in Florida." Christina's face went pale. "No way. No one outside of Icon knows where Iconia is." So we believed, but apparently that information was somehow leaked to Trickshot, said Chaser. In any case, we must now prepare for his inevitable assault on the island. I'm confident that Iconia's defenses and security systems are more than enough to protect the island. But Trickshot has been known to win despite the odds being against him, hence why I have called you here. Not to show any disrespect, Superior, but I don't see how I am supposed to help, said Christina. I have fought Trickshot before, true, but he's beaten me twice. If you were going to ask me to kill him, oh, I would never ask you to do something you have already proved you cannot do competently, said Chaser. I learn from my mistakes. If I wanted Trickshot dead, I would just send one of the other agents to do it. Christina frowned. Then what do you want me to do? Just try to keep him off the island? On the contrary, said Chaser. I want Trickshot to come here. What? Said Christina in shock. Why? He's the enemy. I thought we didn't want him here. Do you think he'll be easier to kill if we lured him onto Iconia or something? A low, robotic chuckle came from the computer screen. On the contrary, Christina, I have no interest in killing Trickshot. I want him to kill me, and I want you to help him do it. The end of The Legacy Superhero, Season 3. Thank you for listening. The story concludes in The Legacy Superhero Season 4, and its first episode, A Superhero's Assault, is coming soon.